In 1960s, on Saturday morning, the whole Britain moves to the same rhythm. You could smell them before you saw them. The fry-ups sizzling in terraced kitchens, scooters polished until they gleamed, radios tuned to the crackling voices of the Beatles or the Stones. The pace was slower, the rhythm familiar, and yet it felt alive in its own way. Here's what nobody tells you about 1960s weekends. They had something we've completely lost without even realizing it. Let's step into that Saturday morning and see what we gave up. 1. Saturday mornings, bustling streets. If you stepped onto a British high street on a Saturday morning in the 60s, you'd know right away it was the weekend. Shop windows glowed with the newest fashions. Mini skirts daringly short, sharp mod jackets lined neatly on racks. Woolworths buzzed with families picking up sweets, toys, or the week's essentials. Marks and Spencer stood as a dependable stop for quality, while the Co-op remained a community staple, where neighbors often bumped into each other mid-shop. Markets spilled into the streets, full of the earthy smell of fruit and vegetables, the chatter of traders calling out prices, and the occasional stall selling records or cheap jewelry. Window shopping wasn't just killing time, it was part of the social life. Can you imagine teenagers today pressing their noses against shop windows when they can buy everything online? A mother might pause to admire fabric for curtains, while her children tugged impatiently toward the toy stall. The cafes were packed too. Strong tea, buttered sandwiches, meat pies steaming hot, and the hum of conversation filled these small but lively spots. For many families, this was as much a tradition as Sunday dinner. Saturday mornings belonged to the streets, crowded, noisy, full of possibility. A weekly stage where ordinary life played itself out with style and warmth. 2. Saturday afternoons, football and escapism. By the afternoon, Saturday felt different. The busy streets grew quiet. Stalls were packed away and people drifted toward their chosen escapes. For millions, that meant football. Stadiums like Highbury, Old Trafford and Anfield filled with fans standing shoulder to shoulder, scarves held high, songs rolling across the terraces. It wasn't clean or comfortable. It was crowded, noisy, sometimes smoky, but that was the charm. You didn't just watch the match, you lived it. When a goal went in, cheer was so loud you felt it in your chest. Television began to bring football home in 1964 when Match of the Day aired for the first time. It was exciting to see highlights on the screen, but no TV could capture the raw atmosphere of being there. The cold air, the smell of pies, the sound of rattles. It was an experience shared by strangers who felt like family for 90 minutes. Back then, a pint in hand was part of the matchday ritual, the smell of beer, mixing with smoke and song. That changed in 1985, when new rules banned alcoholic drinks from the view of the pitch. The terraces that once held both scarves and pints became more regulated, a sign of how the game, and weekends themselves, were moving toward a different kind of order. The atmosphere at the grounds will just simply never be the same. Not everyone could make it to the stands. Many stayed in the pub, huddled around a radio, pints in hand. Pool coupons were spread across the tables, checked carefully as the results came in. The football pools were a national obsession. People dreamed that a handful of correct score draws could turn shillings into life-changing winnings. Most weeks, the slips brought nothing but disappointment, but the hope was just so addictive, and the talk of maybe next week was half the fun. And if football didn't grab you, the cinema likely did. Saturday afternoons were golden for film lovers. Crowds lined up outside picture houses to see Sean Connery's James Bond save the world with a smirk and a gadget, or to watch Hammer Horror's blood-red thrills. Double bills were common, 2 films for the price of 1, so you could spend hours inside, gasping, laughing, or clinging to your seat. The moment the lights dimmed and the projector flickered to life, the outside world vanished. That was the beauty of a 60s Saturday afternoon. Whether you were shouting yourself hoarse on the terraces, checking pool slips with a hopeful grin, or sinking into a cinema seat, You were lifted out of ordinary life. It was an escape, pure and simple, before the evening called you back again. Saturday nights, youth culture and music. By evening, the weekend changed gear. The shops dimmed, streets cooled, and the night opened its doors. Dance halls lit up first. Places like the Hammersmith Palais and Mecca's Locarno ballrooms pulled in crowds looking for music, company, and a bit of shine after a long week. The floors were waxed, the bands were tight, and the rhythm was steady enough for anyone to try. You could show off a new dress, a sharp suit, or just the nerve to ask for a slow dance. Teenagers had been staking out record shops all day, listening, arguing, choosing. At night, they wanted the real thing. Live bands, loudspeakers, lights catching the sweat on faces. Friends met at the entrance and moved as a pack, hoping the last bus would wait. Sometimes it did, most times it didn't. Out on the roads, the mod crowd took over. Vespas and Lambrettas lined the curbs, chrome mirrors bright under the street lamps. Brighton and Margate turned into weekend meeting points where style mattered as much as speed. Parkas, neat haircuts, and soul on the portable player. Now and then, the piece snapped, and the headline writers got what they wanted. But most nights were about showing up and being seen. Not everyone chased the bright lights. Pubs did good business on Saturday nights. A pint, a plate of crisps, and a game of darts carried a room a long way. If there was a jukebox, even better. Someone always picked a song that changed the mood, and for 3 minutes, the whole place felt like a small concert. The regulars knew who would sing along and who would pretend not to. At home, the glow came from the television. Early in the decade, families gathered for jukebox jury, arguing about hits and misses like a panel of experts. Toward the end of the 60s, Morecambe and Wise began to settle into the weekend like old friends you were happy to welcome in. The jokes were gentle, the timing was sharp, and living rooms laughed in sync. Saturday night in 1960s, Britain wasn't one thing. It was a choice. Ballroom polish or basement beat, scooter runs or quiet pints. A front room with a telly or a hall where the floor shook. However you spent it, the night had a way of making the week feel far away. At least until the church bells and roast smells of Sunday came calling. 4 Sundays. Stillness with change. Creeping. In Sunday still felt like someone pressed pause. Streets were quiet. Shop blinds stayed down because the law said so, and most people accepted it. Morning moved slowly. Church for some, a walk for others. Kettles boiled, papers hit the doorstep with a soft thud, and the day unfolded in small, careful steps. Home was the center. You could smell lunch long before it was served. Roast beef or chicken. Yorkshire pudding that rose just right. Gravy made in the tin. Trifle waiting in the cold. Jelly set, custard thick. Cream ready. Families gathered, plates passed. The talk looping back to neighbors. Football scores. Plans for the next week. If the doorbell rang, it was usually a relative, not a salesman. The radio kept the mood steady. At lunchtime, family favorites linked voices across borders and barracks, sending songs to soldiers and sons abroad. It was gentle, warm, familiar, but underneath that calm, something new was humming. Out at sea, pirate radio ships sent pop music across the water, louder and faster than the BBC would play. Young ears tuned in on little transistor sets, the signal sometimes fading, sometimes bright as a match struck in the dark. It felt slightly forbidden, which made it feel alive. Newspapers were part of the ritual, too. The Sunday Times for long reads and arguments. News of the world for the gossip and the shock. Pages spread over the table after lunch. Fingers stained with ink. Everyone cherry-picking their bit and then swapping. Crosswords were tackled. Adverts circled. A scrap of a story might fuel a whole afternoon's debate. Not every door stayed shut. The rules were loosening in places. Some museums and galleries opened on Sundays, quietly at first, then more often. A rainy afternoon could be spent under high ceilings, looking up at paintings while your footsteps echoed. In Wales, the old habit of closing pubs on Sundays began to be tested by local votes. Change was careful, but it was coming. So the day held two truths: stillness, because the country needed a breath; movement, because the young wanted noise and choice. You could feel both at once. A roast on the table and a pirate signal whispering from a radio. The sermon in the morning, and a museum ticket in your pocket by tea time. Sunday was no longer only about stopping. It was about deciding what to keep and what to open up. 5. Cultural and legal boundaries. Weekends in the 60s were shaped by more than habit. The law drew lines. Some were clear, some were odd. And bit by bit, those lines began to move. Take the cinema. For years, Sunday shows were tightly controlled. Towns had to allow them, and many didn't. But by the early 60s, more places said yes. Local orders came through, curtains opened, and a quiet Sunday afternoon could now include a film. It still wasn't a free-for-all. Rules about hours and staffing stayed, but you could feel the shift. Families chose a matinee after lunch. Teenagers slipped into the back row for a double bill. The day of rest made room for a little light and noise. Sport moved slower. The idea of full professional fixtures on Sundays was still touchy. Tradition held a firm grip, and many older voices wanted the day to stay calm. But the mood was changing. Crowds were growing, TV was hungry, and clubs needed new ways to draw fans. Late in the decade, one-day county cricket on Sundays arrived and felt like a small revolution. Shorter matches, set start times, guaranteed action. You could watch your team and be home in time for tea. Football, though, mostly kept to Saturdays through the 60s. That door would open later. These changes sparked debate at every level. In Parliament, on church steps, around dinner tables, parents talked about the way they were raised. Teenagers talked about what they wanted. Was Sunday meant for silence, or could it carry a bit of joy without losing its center? The old laws weren't just about faith. They were about the pace of life, the shape of family time, and the fear that noise would drown out what made the day special. By the end of the 60s, the map looked patchy. In one town, the cinema ran a Sunday matinee. In the next, it stayed dark. In some places, cricket crowds cheered on a Sunday. In others, the grounds were shut. The rules were still there, but the cracks were wider. People were testing the edges. Not to throw Sunday away, but to stretch it, to keep the roast dinner and the newspaper, and still allow a ticket stub in a pocket. The boundary between rest and leisure didn't disappear. It shifted a little, and then a little more. 6. Class and regional divide. Weekends didn't look the same for everyone. Where you lived and what you earned shaped what you did. For many working-class families, the heart of the weekend was close to home. Saturday meant the football terraces, scarves up, boots on concrete, the crush and the song. After the match, it was the pub, a pint, a plate of crisps, darts on the wall, and the same faces in the same corners. Later, bingo halls drew crowds, smoky rooms, quick numbers, a hush before a shout. It was cheap, social, and hopeful. A small stake, a big dream, and a walk home under orange street lamps. Middle-class weekends ran on quieter lines. Gardens were tended, lawns cut in clean stripes, a game of bridge at a friend's house, a tray of biscuits, careful scores kept in pencil. If the weather held, there might be a drive into the countryside, hedges drifting by, a flask of tea on a car bonnet, children racing through long grass until the light went soft. Place mattered too. In the north and the Midlands, mill towns and pit villages tilted toward football and working men's clubs, music, snooker, a raffle at the end of the night. In the south and suburbs, you were more likely to see neat front gardens on Saturday morning and a Morris Minor packed for a Sunday run. And then there was the sea. Coaches lined up before dawn, names in the window, engines ticking. Families climbed aboard with sandwiches wrapped in greaseproof paper. Blackpool, Scarborough, Morecambe if you were from the north, Brighton or Margate if you were from London. As car ownership grew, more people drove themselves. Windows down, radio low, the promise of salt in the air. The beach was a leveller, deck chairs, chips, a hired bucket and spade, and the same cold water for everyone. So the weekend carried two rhythms, club and terrace, garden and road. Different pockets of the country moved in their own way. But the aim was similar. A break that felt earned, a few hours that felt yours. 7. Generational tensions. The weekend drew a line across the dinner table, parents on one side, teenagers on the other. Mum and Dad kept to what they knew. Church, a slow walk, the roast done right, the paper folded just so. The kids wanted noise, new clothes, new songs. A night that didn't ask permission. Saturday proved it. Short skirts and sharp suits filled the dance floors. Bands played loud and fast. Coffee bars stayed open late. Style mattered as much as sound. It wasn't only fashion. It was identity. A way to say politely or not that the new crowd had arrived. Then Sunday came, and the clash showed. The older generation wanted the quiet kept, shops shut, radio soft, rest, not racket. But the spirit of the swinging 60s didn't take a day off. In some towns, the music kept going, even if it had to duck the rules. Liverpool's Cavern Club opened its doors most days of the week, and on Sunday 19th August 1962, Ringo Starr played his first cavern show as the Beatles' drummer. A sacred day to some, a milestone night to others. Arguments were small, but steady. It wasn't like this in our day. Your day is not our day. Parents feared the rush would sweep away what made Sundays special. Teenagers felt the hush pressed too hard on their backs. Many homes found a middle road. Roast at 1, records by 3. Morning service, then a new single, spinning on a cheap turntable while the gravy cooled. That's how change often comes, not with grand speeches, but with weekends that shift by inches. A matinee added here, a club opened there. A record played a little louder, a little earlier, until nobody remembers when the line moved. The quiet never fully left the British weekend. But the young learned to bend it, and the old learned, slowly, to share. Were weekends in the 60s, with their slower pace and simple joys, better than the noisy rush we live with now? Share your thoughts, your memories, your family stories, or how you think weekends have changed. We'd love to hear your comparisons in the comments.